If you know anything about me, you know that I love airtime. So when I saw that SeaWorld Orlando was building a launch coaster with a bunch of airtime hills, I thought I was gonna love it. When the ride first opened in 2022, a lot of people were saying that IceBreaker was a lot more aggressive than they thought it would be, which is a good thing for me because I am a thrill seeker. So I got really excited to try out IceBreaker. I actually visited the park in 2020 and 2021, so I got to see IceBreaker in person, but of course SeaWorld delayed it an extra year after the pandemic, so it didn't open until 2022. I did not get back to the park until 2024, which is when I finally got to take a couple laps on IceBreaker. Unfortunately, when I visited in 2024, it was on the 5th of July, so the park was absolutely slammed, so I only managed to get 2 different rides on IceBreaker, one in the front and one in the back. But I totally would have wanted to ride this ride more, because I walked away from IceBreaker really disappointed, which is kind of funny because I had a similar situation with Pipeline, which is literally right across the lake from IceBreaker, and I actually have a full video about Pipeline right here if you want to check that out. So what is my problem with IceBreaker? Was I disappointed with the layout? No, I thought the forces were actually really impressive on IceBreaker. The thing that bothers me is the trains, and obviously most people have a problem with Premier Rides trains, and this one is no different. So I have plenty of experience riding Full Throttle and West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and I've been on Electric Eel a whole bunch of times because I am from Southern California and we have 3 really solid Premier Rides launch coasters down here. And I got to visit Discovery Kingdom, Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and Busch Gardens Tampa before I got to ride IceBreaker, so I have plenty of experience with the trains that Premier Rides have. So I don't really have a problem despite the lack of legroom and despite how ridiculously tight they are. Like when you're actually sitting in a Premier Rides ride vehicle, it's not that bad. Just getting in and out of it can be a total disaster, especially if it has comfort collars. But the comfort collars on IceBreaker were actually removed, which is awesome. I'm glad I didn't ride this attraction with comfort collars. That makes me really happy. The thing about the trains is actually the backrest. So this ride opened in 2022 with comfort collars, and at some point between 2022 and when I got to ride it in 2024, they actually took out the comfort collars. I believe it was to lower the height requirement because it was higher than expected. That's all dandy and all, but unlike every other Premier Rides roller coaster that I have ridden, IceBreaker trains have like a little wedge in the backrest, and that created so much discomfort for me because just like a lot of other roller coasters, the restraints on IceBreaker will come down tighter on your body with positive g-forces. So when that happens, it'll push your back into that little wedge in the backrest, and it was pinching me and it hurt a lot. And as I said, I only got to do this ride twice, and my first ride experience was pretty much ruined by that wedge. On my second ride, which was in the front row, I did my best to keep the lap bar up so I would have room to breathe from the back wedge, but it still wasn't the most comfortable experience. Every other Premier Rides roller coaster that I have been on doesn't have this little bump, so I don't know why IceBreaker does. I don't know if they had to cut open the seats to get rid of the comfort collar, but whatever they did, they absolutely wrecked this ride experience, in my opinion. That wedge sucks, and it hurt. It was pinching my back really hard, and it ruined my first ride experience. So that is my biggest problem with IceBreaker. So now that we've covered it, I'm going to try to go through this layout without discussing the wedge. But it's really important to know that when I'm talking about all the forces in this layout, the wedge is there to hinder it, or to be an annoyance, to be a pain in the butt, literally. Not literally, but you know what I mean. So let's dig into this layout. You're going to start things off with a switch track, which is pretty unique. I'm pretty sure out of all of the roller coasters that I have ridden, this is only one of 2 rides that start with a switch track. One of 3. I forgot about Mr. Freeze. We got Mr. Freeze, we got Powder Keg at Silver Dollar City, and we got this one. Those are the ones that I can list off the top of my head. So after that, it'll take you into a pretty controversial swing launch section. So I've heard a lot of different opinions on this section of the ride. In my experience, I'm a pretty solid fan. The only thing that I'm not a fan of is this first backwards launch. It feels very pointless. I feel like this swing launch section should have had 3 launches, just like most swing launch sections. Just take a look at the the Skyrocket 2 model that'll start with a very short forwards launch, then a more forceful backwards launch, and then a third launch that'll get you up through the rest of the layout, or like Pantheon, which will have one launch, one backwards launch, and then one forwards launch that'll get you over the top hat. But for some reason, IceBreaker starts with an extra backwards launch, and this is the most forceless and useless part of the ride. Like, my first ride was in the back row, and I thought it was pointless. Maybe get like an ounce of floater airtime, but that's it. Really not noteworthy. And then I rode the ride in the front row, and it felt even more pointless. It was very stupid. So I don't know why this ride didn't start with just a forwards launch into the rollback for the top hat. I feel like that would have made more sense. This first launch just feels very stupid and like a waste of time almost. But after that, you're gonna roll into the second launch on the attraction, which is the first forwards launch. One thing that I should discuss is the swing launch section is basically a massive W. So the lowest section is where the launch track itself is, and then you have an airtime pop before the top hat, and you have an airtime pop before the spike. So when you're rolling through that second launch, you're gonna hit the forwards airtime pop for the first time, which gives a light pop of airtime on the first pass through, and then the stall out on the top hat gives some light weightlessness, and then you get that same pop of airtime going backwards through that airtime moment. In the front row, the weightlessness on the stall out is actually really fun on the top hat, which makes sense because you're higher up on that moment. So after those moments, you're gonna hit the second backwards launch, which is the third launch on the attraction. All of these launches are pretty forceless. They're not very impressive, so there's that. You're gonna hit the strongest moment of backwards airtime on this ride, which is really cool. Backwards airtime is very unique, and it's an awesome sensation. I would say it's a decent pop of airtime. Like, it's alright. It's not insane, but it's solid. But when you're moving backwards, it's obviously a lot cooler. And then you're gonna hit the massive spike, which is technically the steepest drop in Orlando, but it totally feels like a cop-out because it's not an actual drop, it's a spike. So I personally don't think that IceBreaker deserves that title. And obviously the weightlessness in the back row is going to be really impressive because you're the highest off of the ground. You have an awesome view, so that's really cool. In the front row, it's a lot less impressive. And then falling back down into that airtime pop, it's less interesting because forwards airtime is a lot more traditional and less cool than backwards airtime. And then you're going to hit the final launch, which will throw you up to your top speed. The pop up is absolutely wild in both the front and the back row. On my first ride in the back row, this airtime moment going at full speed like literally had me gasp because I was just shocked at how powerful it is. That being said though, it is not very sustained. So I love powerful airtime, but I really love sustained airtime. So this moment's not really catered to me. It's really impressive and it's really cool, but I'm more impressed by the top hat, which happens right afterwards. This is also a very powerful airtime moment, and it's a lot more sustained. So even in the back row, you start feeling airtime before you crest the drop, which is wild. It's really impressive. Like, the profiling makes it look like you're not going to feel airtime until you start dropping because the crest into it is curved, but you start feeling airtime while you're still turning up into the element, even in the back, which is just absolutely wild. So in both the front and the back, this is my favorite part of the ride, the top hat itself, like actually going over the thing. So it's really impressive. It's really solid. If it wasn't for the stupid wedge, this would be an awesome airtime moment, but it is an awesome airtime moment, but whatever. The drop is really steep, and of course it gives awesome airtime. The valley after that is when the wedge really became a big problem for me, but we're just kind of gonna gloss over that, as I mentioned earlier. The two hills after that are actually really solid airtime moments. The first hill more so than the second, but they're still awesome pops of airtime that'll throw you up out of your seat, and that'll bring you to this turnaround element. In the front row, this moment was pretty forgettable, but in the back, it actually had a light moment of airtime coming out of it, which is pretty cool. It almost has like baby treble clef vibes, but that's kind of a stretch. You're gonna go through a wave turn, which is probably the most disappointing part of the ride. You have absolutely no airtime on this thing. You just kind of float through it sideways, and at this point I was in a lot of pain. After that, you're gonna go through a turn that's an absolutely nothing element. You feel zero forces going under that top hat, and then you have one more solid airtime pop before the brakes. So the forces on this ride are really, really impressive, but I just can't overlook how much pain I was in because of that stupid wedge. If these trains were like every other premiere ride besides trains, I probably would not have a problem with IceBreaker, and it would probably be my second favorite roller coaster in the park. But I just can't overlook the stupid wedge and how it was pinching my back, so I don't feel comfortable ranking this ride over rides like Pipeline, Kraken, or Manta, you know? So that's just really, really disappointing. Like, I don't know why this is the only ride with the stupid wedge. It's probably because the ride opened with comfort collars and then they got rid of them. I've been trying to dig through old footage to see if the wedge was there when the ride opened with comfort collars, but it's really hard to tell. If you got to ride IceBreaker when it had comfort collars, please let me know if that stupid wedge was there. Off of 2 rides, I walked away thinking it was better in the front, but that also might be because my second ride was in the front, so I knew I should like brace for the backrest pain. Like I didn't know what I was walking into when I got on the thing for the first time in the back row, so that's not great. So maybe if I got on IceBreaker again and gave both rows another shot, that opinion might change. Another thing is the operations on this ride were absolutely terrible. This might have been the slowest crew in the park. They were just horrendous. And as I mentioned, SeaWorld was packed the day that I went, and they had like an hour plus wait, and they were just absolutely crawling. Very inefficient, and of course those trains don't have the best capacity. The line did not move at all. It was very, very slow getting on this thing. I thought that IceBreaker was going to be my type of ride, and I guess it is from a Forces perspective, but the ride experience left me beyond disappointed. Like, even if you try to ignore the pain that I was in, the fact that the wave turn had no airtime, and the fact that the turn under the top hat was another useless element is pretty disappointing. Like, this layout isn't that long, and that's a pretty good stretch of track where you don't feel any forces. Like, and of course the backwards launch to begin the ride is another pointless moment. So to fix IceBreaker, I would get rid of that first launch. You would start with the first forward launch. I would probably reprofile those elements on the return trip, and then I would also get rid of the stupid wedge. I really want to know why it's there. No other Premier Rides coaster has it, so it's just beyond stupid. Another thing is, I feel like the color scheme is really dumb. It also doesn't make any sense that this ride is themed to the Arctic, even though the Arctic section is closer to Kraken, so this ride is just off by itself for no reason, so that doesn't make any sense. I do like the location along the water though, so maybe give it a new theme. I guess that's another way to fix IceBreaker. So what do you think of IceBreaker? Do you like it more than I do? Do you feel just like me? Please let me know in the comments below. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you later.